Another season, another reading challenge from Victoria completed. I was doing the spring reading challenge. I have it all written down here so that I know all of the prompts and stuff, just so you know why I'm looking down. I have read and reviewed all of these already on my channel in my monthly reading wrap-ups, so I am probably not going to go into that much depth about them here, because you can already see it if you do wish to do so. Let's delve in. The first prompt is flowers and or nature on the cover, and for that I read Wranglestone by Darren Charlton. This is a part zombie epic, part gay love story. This was really interesting. It's YA, so I definitely read it faster than I was expecting to. It's written by a British author, but it's set in US national parks, and is a very curious story with a little bit of mystery in it as well, with the zombie side of things. So I'm looking forward to reading the second one, which I believe is Timberdark, and seeing where the story goes. Then a book with queer rep. This could have worked for it, but we don't double up here. Well, we do, but I am always too ambitious. So instead, I went with Significant Others by Armistead Maupin. This is the 5th book in the Tales of the City series. This is written by a gay author, but also follows a vast variety of characters who are trans, gay, lesbian, etc., and has fantastic representation. I really enjoyed this series. I also read Sure of You, and that was one of my least favourites, and hilariously, it focuses on the straight couple. So, it wasn't as big of a fan of that, but I have 3 books left, I believe, in the series, and I'm excited to carry on. Then match your drink to the cover of the book, and I'm not getting another one out, but I had a Diet Coke, and I matched it with System Collapse by Martha Wells. This is the 7th book in the Murderbot series, which I adore. We're following a security unit who's hacked its governance module so that it doesn't have to follow orders anymore, but instead of going rogue, it just keeps protecting the idiot humans around it and watching soap operas. I love this series so much. This one was really interesting. We are continuing on from the only actual full novel in the story with this novella, and it was really interesting, as always. Love it. The oldest book on your TBR. Now this can be taken however you need it to be. So is it the book that you've had the longest, or is it the book that was published the longest ago? For me, getting this when I was in year 4 at school, what the hell age is that, 9-ish? It's both, and that is the Holy Bible, New International Version, Children's Edition. I've had this since year 4, and I have never read it. I am personally an atheist, so I just left it, but I want to keep it. It's a memory, and I didn't like that it was sat on my TBR shelf, so I was like, screw it, I'm gonna read it. And I won't lie, it's a difficult read. I imagine it is so even if you're religious and this text is your specific text. Still a difficult read, still a bit of a slog. Very glad that I managed to make it through and read the whole thing. Then read a seasonal book, and I went with The Vanishing Cherry Blossom Bookshop by Takuya Asakura, translated by Yuka Maeno. I loved this! No one is surprised. Also, we have a tree out that had its blossoms on when I was reading this, so perfect timing. This is another adorable translated Japanese book about dealing with grief and life circumstances, as so many of them seem to be, and yet I love them all. Then read from an Irish author. No one is surprised, I went with Landy. He had a new book out, and that was A Soul Full of Shadows, the most recent book in the Skullduggery Pleasant series. I did not love this. It's a 4-star instead of a 5. Like, it's still fantastic, no one is surprised, I still love Skullduggery, but it just felt a bit too predictable. And I'm not sure how much of that is the story coming around on itself too many times because we've had too many books, how much of it is that it's technically a middle grade and I'm reading it at almost 30. I don't know, but it was a bit too predictable, and all of the moments that are supposed to shock you, I was like, well, I know what he's going to do, so it's fine. So, Then a reread I went with I Like This Poem, edited by Kaye Webb. I've had this for many years. It's a selection of poems that are organised for age appropriateness, but you can read any of them. I've had this since I was a child, I've had this since I was 6 or 7, and it was really enjoyable reading through this, and I've obviously read every single one of these poems, but seeing which ones sparked that memory inside of me and that kind of nostalgic reread was really interesting. Then a book with food on the cover, Ultra Processed People by Chris Van Tulleken. This is all about the excessive processing that's done to food in the modern day to both reduce its cost for the production side of things for capitalism, but also to make it have a longer shelf life, which can assist people in more rural areas. And it's all about the impact that this has on our body, and the author is very against ultra-processed foods, which was quite interesting. I had an ultra-processed food this morning, so clearly it didn't change my behaviour. It was a chocolate-filled croissant. Then the next prompt is a random pick. So I picked this out of a jar, and it turned out to be The Drowning King by Emily Holleman. This is the second book in the Cleopatra duology, where she follows Arsinoe, and in this book it's the POV of Arsinoe and Ptolemy, Cleopatra's younger siblings, during her reign, and how they were trying to survive in this. As we all know, Egyptian pharaohs often killed off their siblings to try and reduce the attacks on power that they might have, and so there's constant suspicion between the siblings and infighting, where otherwise there wouldn't have been, and they would have been perfectly happy and friendly to each other if they hadn't been the ruling power. This was really interesting, and I read another book about Cleopatra, and so it was interesting to read both of them and compare them. A big book, over 400 pages. Does this one count? Children of Strife by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the fourth and most recent book in the Children of Time series, where we follow humanity has sent some people out into the stars to try and like terraform some other planets so that we can go to them. Obviously shit goes wrong, shit goes down, etc, etc. And this is the fourth book in that. We have aliens, some of which are created by humanity, some of which are not, and it's just such an interesting look always at people's inner motivations and how they can drive these changes and how society functions, and it's fascinating that he does this in this alien landscape. A book with a disabled representation. This one is interesting. Elantris by Sanderson. So there are characters who essentially die, but they're still living, but they can't recover from any injuries they get. So if you give them a little paper cut, that's it. They have a paper cut, they cannot be cured. And I mean, I guess that's not so far off of scurvy, now that I'm thinking about it. But yes, this was the closest one that I had that I was able to read in this time frame. I do have Unwell Women, which is all about women within healthcare, and that would have been a really good shout. The other books that I have don't have any in the blurb able to find disabled characters, which was very frustrating. This was my first ever Brando Sando. I do not wish to give him any moolah, because Mormon, and he gives money to the Mormon church, but this was gifted to me by the wonderful Renee Reeds, and I really enjoyed it, annoyingly. I loved it, I was so invested, I was so gripped. I had a fantastic time with this book. I don't know if I'm going to read any more Sanderson, but if more comes out in this series specifically, because it's currently a standalone with a novella, I believe, then I would be tempted to scour the charity shops. The next prompt is to match your outfit to the cover. I did this in the TBR video, and that is The Autobiography of My Mother by Jamaica Kincaid. I wore a pink dress to match this at the time for the TBR video. This is utilising a lot of Kincaid's own growing up and her knowledge of the various islands around the Caribbean, but also then fictionalising that account to a way where it's definitely not her story, but it uses moments in her life, which I know because I read Putting Myself Together by her, which is a mix of writings, some of which are non-fiction, talking about her childhood. And so it was really interesting to read this after having read that and knowing how much influence her own childhood had had on writing this fiction work. Moving these out of the way, because there's a lot of books still left to go through. Next up, a book that is second-hand and or borrowed, and this I went with Snuff by Terry Pratchett. It is 38 in the Discworld series, and I borrowed it from my partner's Discworld collection. I have, since reading this, finished Discworld. I have 2 of the like 0.5s that I still need to read, but I have finished the 41 novels in Discworld, which is insane. This one, really good. Vimes meets a new race of characters in Discworld and learns how they are important and should be cared for, but also solves a crime. Standard Vimes stuff. A classic. So, slightly cheaty. So I was reading Middlemarch by George Elliott with the lovely Olivia Savannah from Elliott's Catastrophe. However, we have not yet finished it. We will do imminently. Imminently. So excited. But we didn't finish this. So I'm going with a modern classic, and that is The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. I knew nothing about this going in. I found it really interesting to see how grief was portrayed in here, and how Hill, a woman, wrote about a woman's grief from the perspective of a man. A very interesting read, and this was gifted to me by the lovely Hannah from the Bookworms Feast. Thank you so much. Then a non-fiction. This was nice and easy. I read multiple non-fictions across this time span, so I just picked Tools for Life, 10 Essential Therapy Skills Everyone Should Know. It was an interesting little read, and I should probably try and action some of the tasks in here. Then a book by a BIPOC author, Black, Indigenous or Person of Colour, and I went with Bernadine Evaristo with Girl, Woman, Other. This book, I had tried to read it previously, and so I was like, not feeling great about it. I'd struggled to get into it, and I was like, oh, like, I'm still gonna read this. I'm gonna like force my way through it. Dear God, I loved it. This was also gifted from Amy Taylor from Bookshop with Amy. Thank you, Amy. And oh my fucking God, this book is amazing. This is so good. I adored every single chapter. We follow different perspectives, and they all link into each other in different ways, and we follow them through, and we're just following black women across, I was going to say the UK, but I'm pretty sure it's just England. We follow black women across England, and we follow them through time from a little bit earlier in like the 60s Windrush generation all the way up to the present day, and we see the racism that they deal with and immigration, and some of them come from different nations but have moved to Britain, and it's a beautifully written book. I absolutely adored it. I'm so glad that I didn't DNF it after that first time. I must have just been not in the right mood for it, but oh my God, this is a 5-star read. I loved it. Okay, then a book with an animal POV, and I had written down Annihilation or Intrigues for this one. Intrigues does have a horse talking, but doesn't have his point of view, and Annihilation doesn't have any animal points of view. I haven't read it at that time. But in this book, which is The Rose Field by Philip Pullman, the third and final book in the Book of Dust, we do follow Pan, who is Lyra's daemon. And Pan is an animal, and whilst he is an extension of her, he's still very much an animal. So I am taking this is counting, he's in the form of an animal, he has the brain of an animal, it's counting, and this was a very interesting book. I think it was done much better than book 2, but I was left with too many questions, and not in a good way, is what I'll say about that. Continuing a series. I mean, half of these could have been for that, but Days of Shattered Faith by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the third book in the Tyrant Philosophers series. There are currently 4.5, there's novella, books out, and I really enjoy the series. I mean, look at the edges. That's not the reason I enjoy the series, but this was actually, I think, my least favourite of the 3, which is such a pity. But I still loved it. It was still 4 stars. It's still 4 stars. Just wasn't my absolute favourite. Book 2. 5-star read. And we are learning a lot more about the world inside of it, so I did enjoy that. Then a retelling, Cleopatra by Sarah El-Arifi. The audiobook for this, fuck my life, it's good. This was, again, very interesting, having read the other book on the same time period. In the same month. Not even in the same 3 months, in the same month. Very interesting. But also, I just loved this. This was beautifully written. Sarah El-Arifi is one of my favourite authors. I love her writing, and the audiobook for this was done beautifully. The narrator was perfection, and this was absolutely fascinating. Loved it. Then a hay fever book, which is a book out of your comfort zone, and unfortunately I didn't love this one. I didn't hate it, but A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. This is a romance book, and I have confirmed what I don't like about romance, because at about the 200-page mark, it goes... The concept of this book is that a woman is getting an email from an African prince telling her she's a princess, and she's like, spam. Not spam. And so the first 200 pages is a little bit about, like, building up the world around, but it's mostly their relationship. And then they start going to this country. And she has to actually, like, and from that point I was interested. I cared about the country. The romance was a perfectly fine subplot. I did not care about seeing their relationship blossom or any of that shit, other than in the context of them learning more together and developing together. So I discovered romance really isn't for me, which is such a pity, because some of them have fantastic storylines. I really enjoyed the way Alyssa Cole was like developing the politics of this nation and how all of that machination ended up with this young woman ending up in the States rather than in her home country. And if Cole writes anything that isn't romance, I'd be intrigued, because I did enjoy it, but unfortunately this, I believe, has confirmed for me that I need something else in my books and not just straight romance. For example, I read Behind Frenemy Lines, and so there was a fake dating frenemy situation that was going on that added enough into the plot and enough action was going on for the characters to have reactions to that I cared. Next up was an international author, and I went with the Ugandan author Vanessa Nakate, who is also a climate activist. This was a very interesting, quite short non-fiction book about her trying to fight for the whole issue with climate change and get people to pay attention, but struggling to do so in a nation which has had a lot more impact than we do, for example, here in the UK, but also is trying to push itself to develop, and so wants to use all these technologies which we're actually trying to phase out, and also the political ramifications and the fact that she is the only black woman often in these spaces when she then goes abroad to often Western countries, and how she has to navigate that as an extra layer of trying to actually talk about something important, and instead she gets cropped out of photos because she's the only black one. Typical. The shortest book on my TBR, and that was 3 Japanese short stories, with stories by Nagai Kafu, Uno Koji, and Akutagawa Ryonosuke. I do apologise to anybody Japanese who just had to listen to me say that. These are 3 tiny stories of men being useless. That's pretty much what happens there. Then a book with 2 or more points of view. Lives of Bitter Rain by Adrian Tchaikovsky is the novella I mentioned previously from the Tyrant Philosopher series, and this is an interesting little addition to book 3, which I quite enjoyed. And then the final prompt is the title starts with S-P-R-I-N, or G. And obviously quite a few books could go for that, but I went with I Shall Wear Midnight by Terry Pratchett, one of the Tiffany Aching books, which I absolutely loved. I believe it's the penultimate Aching book, with the final one being the final Discworld book. I loved this, I love Tiffany Aching. It took me a little while to grow into it. The Knack McFeagles definitely helped, but I had a fantastic time with this book. And that is it. That is the entire bingo board completed. I did it. I'm very, very pleased with myself. I know that we don't always have to complete the entire bingo board, but I like setting myself a challenge. And also, in this time period, I did my reading 30 books in 30 days reading challenge, so I was like, well, I have so many books that I'm getting through. Surely I must be able to cross off most of this list. So I think I did pretty decently. Let me know down below in the comments if you have read any of these books and what your thoughts are, because even though I didn't go into them in too much depth here today, I'm always happy to chat about the books. Of course, Victoria is tagged down below, so please do go and follow her. She is a wonderful human being as well as a wonderful creator, and I shall see you folks in the next video. Bye!